I refuse to let my kids play horror games that will traumatize them for a longer time. What do they mean? When I push a button, they do what I want them to do exactly when I want them to.
Unless you were living under a rock during the late 90s, Mortal Kombat is the game that everyone knew. I remember all my friends having it on our SNES, and then after school we'd go hang out in the arcades. Mortal Kombat was the game that the cool kids were playing. It was a pop culture icon, a classic even until today. But back then, we were just literal kids. As a 10-year-old just excited to play a new game my dad bought me, seeing Kung Lao's vertical hat slice fatality frightened me for weeks. A person getting ripped in half with blood splattering everywhere was just too much for a kid like me. Mortal Kombat ruined my childhood. Mortal Kombat was the first game that exposed me to gore and violence that nobody expected during that time. If you still don't know about this, Mortal Kombat was actually the reason ESRB ratings were invented for video games, a rating system for parents to gauge the suitability of video games for their kids. Mortal Kombat was actually meant for mature, arcade-going audiences, but I remember the commercials for Mortal Kombat on TV never showed any of the gore or any warning of the sort. It was an eye-opener for me, to say the least. And the next games my parents bought for me, they were sure to check the ratings first. I mean, who wouldn't, right? Going back to when I said that Mortal Kombat ruined my childhood, I don't mean to say that I regret playing MK. In a way, it changed a part of how I viewed video games as a whole when I was a kid. I know, it's a bit confusing, so let me elaborate. Some games like Pokemon or Zelda, I consider as the games that defined my childhood. Pokemon gave me the best years of my childhood memories. I met a lot of new friends by trading cards, battling my friends on Diamond or Pearl while waiting for the school bus, and watching all the Pokemon movies together in the theaters. For Mortal Kombat, I guess it was just too early for me to be exposed to all the blood and gore as a 10-year-old. It was a life-changing experience indeed, and it changed the way I view video games as just some pure fun pastime for kids to enjoy. Video games like Pokemon are the ones that were a big part of my childhood years, and I will forever cherish the priceless memories it gave me up to this day. But there are also some games that hit you like a brick on the head. Those that I don't really consider my favorite games, but it really left a lasting impact in what I believe shifted a huge part of how I viewed the world as a child. A few years down the line in 2001, Silent Hill 2 was released for the PlayStation. Still, as a kid, I felt hesitant to play a horror game because I still want to be able to sleep at night. My best friend in middle school kept teasing me that I was a wuss for being scared of a video game. That's actually pretty true because I only played it when I was hanging out together with him. All the time we were playing it, I was really scared. Even just watching him play was enough to terrify me. When we think of the horror genre, the first thing that comes to mind are in-your-face jump scares and grotesque looking creatures and monsters. But let me tell you, Silent Hill was completely different from that. You could say it's not exactly scary with monsters suddenly popping out in the frame and then you get scared shitless and run to your mom for protection. Silent Hill's atmosphere is more of the dread and fear of the unknown. Watching my buddy play for the first few hours was unnerving. James, the player you control in the game, is just walking around this barren town covered completely in fog where you can't see anything more than 5 feet in front of you. You're navigating yourself in decrepit abandoned apartment hallways with just a flashlight to guide your way through. If you've played it, there's something so unsettling that you can't describe about the idea of what's waiting on the other side that we couldn't see. I sat behind my best friend's bed with my toes gripped, waiting for a zombie hand or a huge monster that would suddenly emerge from the fog and suddenly attack him. Seeing the blood splatters on the walls made me anxious that for every door he tried to open, there would be a monster waiting to jump and rip his guts. I kept preparing for those dreadful moments to happen in the game, but it didn't. Silent Hill 2 was an eerie experience, wandering to the unknown and leaving the players to their own imaginations and curiosity of the most fearful and terrifying thing that could potentially happen. When my friend finished the game, I was left speechless. As kids, we might not have completely understood the gravity of Silent Hill's story. There were also no monsters that try to chase and kill us the entire length of the game. Zero. There were no jump scares and shocking twists that happened in the game, but the fact that the only thing that kept us in immense fear was all manufactured in our heads. It was purely psychological. Silent Hill 2 ruined a part of my childhood. Silent Hill gave birth to a new type of fear inside of me, the fear of the unknown. Enough about horror and gore. Another game that ruined my childhood in a different way was the new Saints Row game released in 2022. This new installment is the 6th of the Saints Row series, the first one being released way back in 2006. The original Saints Row was a game that I wouldn't really consider as my favorite during my childhood, but I do have fond memories of playing it. I mean, it was the first game I got for my Xbox 360, and its laid-back gameplay made me play all the entries of the game to this day. Back then, people were calling Saints Row a Grand Theft Auto clone when it first came out 17 years ago. Both games are open-world adventure games that are centered around urban lives, crime, and drama. You control criminals, complete wacky missions, shooting guns, and fight with the police. You name all that GTA does, and for sure Saints Row has it too. However, as Saints Row's developers put out succeeding installments in the series, the game became far weirder and wackier than GTA. I remember fighting off a voodoo cult using a katana as a weapon for Saints Row 2, and for Saints Row 4, I was killing off gangsters with Marvel-like superpowers. The change in direction made the Saints Row series its own genre that every gamer loved during its time. I just really loved how Saints Row fully embraced how absurd and ridiculous it was. With its over-the-top story and wacky characters, how Saints Row didn't take itself even just a small bit of seriousness is what gave it its whole unique charm to all gamers out there. But nothing can be said when Saints Row decided to reboot the series in 2022. I was really disappointed when I played the game and felt like all the things I've loved about Saints Row since I was a kid were butchered and were turned into a mediocre hot mess. To be honest, I wouldn't really say Saints Row 2022 is an extremely awful game. I guess it just didn't live up to the same hype it had for its previous entries. It was generic, bland, and safe for a Saints Row game. The character dialogues were just downright terrible, and they toned down the humor and jokes in the game, not to mention the story didn't have any impact or memorable moments. As a fan of the original and previous installments, this reboot felt like a complete bastardization of the story. The game just felt empty. That's it. With this being said, Saints Row 2022 also ruined my childhood. It ruined the old Saints Row I came to love when I was a kid. I was so excited to play Saints Row 2022, hoping that it'll remind me of the good times playing the original, and boy, was it such a huge letdown. Seeing your childhood game turned into a pile of garbage is really frustrating because it's very hard to replicate the same passion and excitement we had before as young gamers now that we're adults. We can all agree that some of the video games we played when we were kids tremendously helped us to be the people we are today. These games that ruined my childhood played a huge part in my growing up. As kids, we only looked at video games as something to have fun and have adventures with. However, from playing and being exposed to these games at a young age, I came to learn that gaming offered much more than that. Video games are capable of inspiring people through their storytelling. Video games and also teach young gamers lessons, comfort, and an outlet for expression to face real-life challenges. And because of this, I appreciate being a gamer much more.